What's up, guys? It's Ben with 2020 election predictions, and today I'm going to be looking at the state of the presidential election between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, kind of looking at some polls, at the betting odds, the Electoral College projections right now, because there's been a lot of punditry in the media, a lot of recent articles coming out, and I want to look at those and kind of evaluate whether I think they are true, how accurate they will be going forward, considering the election is only in 5 or 6 months, so it's pretty close. So just diving right in, looking at the Real Clear Politics national average, Biden is up by about 5.5 points, and this has been pretty steady throughout, um, frankly, throughout the past year. And some articles have commented on this and saying that this is the steadiest popular vote lead that any challenger has had against an incumbent in recent history. Because, like in 2016, the polls were kind of all over the place. We saw some polls where Hillary was up by 12 points. We had some polls where Trump was up by 3 points. And while the average of the polls was pretty similar, I would say, um, as of now, I mean, Biden has consistently been between like 4 and 8 points above Trump. And pundits in the media have said that this bodes well for Biden in saying that Trump's numbers around 42, 43, 44, his base, it's kind of stuck there, and that they won't move on election day. And what these media pundits are saying is that a lot of people are overestimating Trump's chances of winning just because of 2016. And what the media likes to point at is saying that, like, look, isn't it so weird that Biden is ahead by so much, his lead is so steady, but his betting odds, the betting odds still have Trump winning by about 8 to 15 points. And if we look at these betting odds, they're very stable as well, almost as stable as the polls. And it's very important to differentiate between these two because the betting odds are not off the popular vote. Obviously, the presidential election is decided by the Electoral College, so the betting odds will bake that in. And also, I mean, the betting odds are assuming a lot of different variables. They're not just going to look at the current polls. Obviously, the polls are going to change in 5 months. And it's really interesting, like over the past 30 years, when kind of betting odds have been a thing, or if you ask a poll of who do you think they're going to win, traditionally these are more accurate than the polls themselves. Obviously, the betting odds are going to be informed by polls, um, but the only time that the presidential betting odds have been different from the presidential victor were actually in 2016. And so a lot of pundits think that people are going to overcompensate Trump's chances in 2020 because they don't trust these polls right now. But also, I kind of want to refute this narrative that because Biden is up by 5.5 points in the polls on average right now, I'll look at a lot of different articles like in 538, if Trump is down in the polls, why do so many Americans think he'll win? 5 reasons pundits will overestimate Trump's odds of winning in November. And like, so, I mean, CNN is kind of all over the place. They have saying Trump will lose in a landslide. Trump has a real shot at winning. But kind of one of their main articles, what it says is that Trump has broken the polls and that in reality, he doesn't have that great of a chance because he's been leading by an average of a 6 point lead and is up in the battleground states. And while I do kind of want to refute this notion that he is ahead in the battleground states because actually, if you look at it state by state, Trump is actually doing better in the battleground states in the polls than he was doing in 2016. Like Wisconsin, it had Hillary up by 6 points. Pennsylvania, it's about the same. And like Michigan had Hillary up by 6 points. And same even with North Carolina and Florida. And a lot of these pollsters have improved how they do things. They're trying to reach out to kind of the shy Trump voters that I think swayed the polls in 2016, but they're very imperfect. And a lot of people will say that state polls, frankly, just aren't as accurate as national polls. Because in 2016, the national polls close to election day were not bad. And Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but Donald Trump won the election. Predicted, I think, is a really good site that kind of encompasses this narrative. Um, that, oh look, Biden's ahead in the polls, but a lot of people think Trump is going to win. So if we go state by state, the Electoral College on Predicted, I mean, it's as close as it can be. Biden, neither Biden nor Trump are over 300 electoral votes, and the two states that if they flipped right now and Trump won them, so the two states that are the deciding states are under 60% likelihood for Trump is winning, and this is very similar to this model that has, I guess, Wisconsin just over 60% and Arizona's at 55%. But it's very similar here. And in the predicted model, they actually have Florida and North Carolina favoring the Republicans rather than them favoring the Democrats here. And I actually trust the predicted model because this is purely a betting prediction market. While this is just factoring in polls and it is getting it's using other things, but I think the predictive model, why this is smarter, is because just like kind of when you're betting on a sports team or even on the stock market, usually the odds are fairly accurate because it's the law of averages. So some people are really going to think Trump's going to win, some people are really going to think Biden, but when you average out, typically the average answer is pretty accurate. Crowds can be very smart. And like for example, in Florida, I think on Real Clear Politics, we saw that Biden was up by 3.5 points. But if we look at the 2018 midterms, Republicans won statewide at the governor and Senate level in a 2018 Democratic wave year. So, and Donald Trump is, I think, at 49 or 50% approval rating in Florida. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that they have Joe Biden favored to win this by 59% in this prediction site. And one thing I do think is interesting is actually this gives Trump a better percent chance than a lot of people did in 2016. Like 538, I think, gave Trump a 28% chance, and people thought that was very generous. But like Princeton, New York Times had Donald Trump only like a 5 and 4% percentage election. And so I think what a lot of people are seeing is they're like, oh, well, Donald Trump's chances are better than in 2016, and he won in 2016, so he's definitely going to win in 2020. And I do think this is a little bit of a fallacy because Trump is still not favored to win based on some models, but obviously, if we look at the betting models, he is favored to win. And so a lot of these articles have tried to figure out why this is. And there's kind of one person said, I think there's a sense that Trump is Teflon politically. And I think a lot of this does come from the 2016 election. The last Gallup poll said that they asked, and 55% of people think Trump will win in 2020, which I think a lot of people in the media kind of try to over exaggerate, saying it's like, oh, whoa, so many people think Trump is going to win. 55% is not that many, and it is a lot smaller than the percentage of people that thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. I mean, nearly everyone thought Hillary Clinton was going to win, even Trump supporters. So 55% isn't that much. And I think this number is going to be a little bit more accurate if we look at here. So there's the 55%. But if we look at the 2018 midterms, obviously the people were fairly wrong about this. So in a Gallup poll, they asked people who would win the House. And by a 50 to 44% margin, they said Republicans. Even though the Democrats were clear favorites, I predicted that the Democrats would win because I thought it was pretty obvious they had an 11-point lead in the generic congressional ballot. But I think a lot of people just didn't trust the media. They didn't trust the polls. And I think this is a fair assumption to make because in 2016, the statewide polls were very, very wrong. And I think a lot of people in 2020 are like, even though the media is telling me over and over again that Biden has this 6-point lead nationally, that he can still win, or that Trump is toast, they're like, well, I'm going to be a little bit more suspicious, which I think is smart. And I don't think the media is giving the people enough credit, and they're kind of making this over exaggerating thing. Is they're like, oh, 55% of people think Trump is going to win. Well, these 55 people are obviously not political scientists, and I think this is a very wrong perception. 5 reasons pundits will overrate Trump's odds of winning in November. I thought this was a pretty interesting article, even though that I don't agree with it. Obviously, the overcompensation for 2016, and I mean this makes sense, but I think that people should compensate because the polls were so wrong in 2016, and the polls are not going to be perfect in 2020, and it does appear so far that the polls are tilted towards the Democrats. Biden's up by 3.5 points in Florida. No one thinks that Biden's going to win by 3.5 points in Florida. Obama didn't even win. So I think we do see a little bit of bias still in the polls. Incumbents win. I do kind of agree with this. A lot of people think in the past there has been an incumbency advantage that like the likes of Bill Clinton, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Obama have had the advantage of. Obviously, the only two incumbents lost, Jimmy Carter and H.W. Bush. But I do kind of agree that this is a very unique time with the coronavirus and the economy taking that Trump can't rely on this incumbency advantage. One thing that I don't understand why they're putting this here, but I totally agree that Donald Trump has an electoral college advantage. This New York Times article said that Donald Trump could win the electoral college, which would make him win re-election and lose the national popular vote by 5 points. And so, if we look here, and we see that Biden is up by 5.5 points. Look, if Donald Trump gets this margin down by half a point, he can still win the election. So this is not the number that the media should be focused on. They should really be focusing on the electoral college, and I'll talk about a little bit about that more later. And I totally get this. Joe Biden is not a very strong candidate. I think there's a lot of pessimism above the Democratic Party. I do think this helps Trump's election chances, but also we do have to remember Hillary Clinton was a horrible Democratic candidate, and I think there's going to be a lot of arguments among Democrats and among Republicans on whether Joe Biden is a better candidate than Hillary Clinton. I mean, Democrats had 3 years to pick out a candidate to beat Donald Trump because Donald Trump is the worst person ever. Kind of, they really think that Donald Trump is just the worst. He's going to destroy the country, and they picked Joe Biden, who I do not think is that strong of a candidate. Maybe he's stronger than Hillary Clinton, but he's very old, and he's definitely not a Barack Obama, who I think was a very, very good candidate. So, lastly, I just want to talk about how I think the media is kind of undercompensating Trump's odds to win. So Trump has a lot of money. He has a lot more money, a lot more campaign experience. In 2016, his campaign was not very organized, didn't have a lot of experience, but now he has the money and he has the expertise. Again, he might not be that popular nationally. Like, I think his approval is hanging around 43 to 44%. But if we look state by state, this was kind of after the 2018 midterms. So his approval in Arizona, 49%. Wisconsin, 47%. If he wins these two states and keeps all the states where his approval is above 50%, then he wins the election. So even if he loses the popular vote by 5 points, so I think that Donald Trump intrinsically has an electoral college advantage. Second to last, Trump has a huge enthusiasm gap. I was just at a lake in the South. On every single boat, there was Trump flags. People were wearing Trump shirts. I mean, it is crazy. And I was talking to one of my friends, and I was saying it's very interesting because in 2012, I did not see that many people with Obama 2012 flags or Obama 2012 shirts. But I feel like everywhere I go, I at least see one person with a Make America Great Again hat or a flag on their car, or like these buses you see, they're kind of like Trump parade type things. Trump's base, even though it's a lot smaller than 50%, people kind of say maybe it's around 35 to 40, maybe even 45%, probably in the range of 30 to 40%. They are very enthusiastic and they are going to turn out to vote. And we don't really know if people are going to turn out on the Democratic side. There's a lot of young voters who we don't know if they're very excited about Joe Biden being the nominee. Um, they will say that they don't like Donald Trump. They think he's a racist, blah, 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 blah. But do they care enough to vote for Joe Biden? And do they think that Joe Biden is the future of the party? Obviously, Joe Biden has had some hiccups in the past with his you ain't black comment. I'm going to focus on that a lot later because I do think that'll be very damaging. Not necessarily among African American people, but I think among his very liberal base who are very anti-racism and they don't want any associations with like them thinking that they're racist. So I think that could hurt him a lot. And lastly, I think Joe Biden is a very risky candidate. I actually think that Joe Biden is more of a ticking time bomb than Donald Trump. I think in 2016 it was definitely the opposite. Donald Trump was a very volatile, risky person. You didn't know what he was going to say. But I think Donald Trump is more of a known quantity now. He's not really going to surprise anyone with his comments because he tweets kind of risky things every day. So I don't think he's going to surprise anyone. But I think when Joe Biden has a gaffe, like when he said, "You ain't black," I think that's really going to hurt him. And he might even say something worse, turning closer to election day, just because of his history of gaffes and because of his age. He's like 77 years old. He's going to be 78 if he wins the presidency on inauguration day. So I definitely think those are two variables there that could very well hurt Joe Biden, and they aren't going to hurt Donald Trump as much, just because Donald Trump is younger and people are kind of used to his style. Okay, so that kind of concludes my video. Obviously, please subscribe here if you haven't, and I will post a new video tomorrow. So thank you for watching. And also,